time to get to this point. As you know, we had some success just a few years ago in really moving that number down, and last year it popped up, and it's popped up again this year, and I would suggest to you this is not a short-term solution that's going on right now. There are factors that are happening out there in the community that are very difficult to manage. In the last couple days, I have talked to a group of concerned moms face-to-face behind closed doors. I've talked to some young men who are out there on the streets telling me very honestly about what is happening out there and what we need to be doing about that and how we could possibly help them change all that. And this is not, there are no easy answers to all this. This is a very complex situation that must be dealt with probably on not maybe an individual basis, but certainly on a small group basis, because it is not something that we can throw assets at and think that all this is going to magically change in a moment's notice. It's going to take a lot of hard work, a lot of hard individual work by a lot of people.
Mr. Wrigley, if I'm watching this right now and I'm looking at, I'm living in Bloomington, Kokomo, Carmel, Greencastle, I'm thinking, that's his problem. I mean, this is an Indianapolis problem, but is this a bigger issue? Is this something more global than just thinking it's an Indianapolis issue?
I believe it is, and when you talk to our ministers, who you'll hear from later, you talk to those leaders in the community, we're seeing some social issues that's leading to this. And I don't want individuals to outside the metro area or even in some of our suburbs think that this is an issue that they won't have to face someday. It is a very real issue. We have some social issues that have to be addressed, and the only way we can address that, Raphael, is to make sure that we have a conversation. I appreciate having this tonight, but we need to do this throughout the city. We need people to roll up their sleeves and help some of these social service agencies help families mend their lives together and make sure that we're not apathetic about crime, homicides in particular, but also education and employment opportunities for today's youth.
So what is the common thread, Mr. Riggs? What is that thread that weaves through the fabric of Kokomo, Bloomington, Indianapolis? What are some of those issues that really someone can't say it's just happening in the big city, in the capital city?
If you look at some of the issues we're having with education, you look at the new introduction of heroin into our cities and our rural areas, that is something that is happening everywhere across the United States and will have damaging effects to not only Indianapolis, but Indiana and our nation if we don't get that under control. Here in Indianapolis, we've invested a lot of resources. We have great partners in the prosecutor's office and other law enforcement. But for us to deal with these issues holistically, the community needs to be involved, and the community needs to come up with some of the solutions working with us in partnership.
Mr. Curry, by the time the cases get to your office and your deputy prosecutors, is it too late? By the time it gets to the being on a docket or being on some probable cause affidavit, is that young man, young woman, that gentleman, gentle lady, is that a life lost?
No, not at all. And obviously, the vast majority of individuals who are prosecuted, number one, will never ever even go to prison, and so there need to be a number of steps. I know the council's considered the possibility of employment where individuals now have to disclose particular convictions they've had in the past, but more importantly, most of these individuals, any individuals who go into the Department of Corrections are going to come out again. And obviously, our office cooperates in reentry programs. I know the mayor takes the lead in reentry programs. I actually got some stats before I came here today. In the first 3 months of this year, about 1,100 individuals have come out of the Department of Corrections to return to Marion County. So we're looking at 4,000 to 5,000 a year. And so may be getting ahead of ourselves, but that is the one of the many areas where the community can be of assistance to all of us up here, and that is to work with these individuals to work on a productive return to the county as opposed to returning to the ways that they've been involved in the past.
Mr. Mayor, is this a money issue? We often hear a couple of things, that some of our civic groups need more money to work in the neighborhoods, that the police need more money to hire more officers. So is this an issue that you will need to find more money in your budget to address this very pressing issue in our community?
Well, everybody wants more money. Everybody always wants more resources. Hardly any question about that. But we spend 92% of the city budget right now on public safety. That's a pretty high percentage. I would suggest to you, with the changing dynamic that's happening out there, we may have to look at redirecting some resources. We may have to look at raising resources. Troy has been terrific in the Public Safety Foundation. A lot of people are helping with that. But our task force, Your Life Matters, I think is going to make an impact. I think it's going to give us a direction, and it's going to give us an opportunity to see what resources, if any, are needed. I would suggest that it would be more resources. You know, this is happening at a younger age than most people would believe, and these primarily young men who are going off the path are doing it at an age that probably most people can't believe, and they're going to need help along the way, and it's going to take resources to do that.
As the mayor is talking, I want to remind you that are watching us on the RTV6 app or the IndyChannel.com that we are awaiting your questions. Again, we want to engage you at home as these fine leaders talk tonight, and of course your questions will be read to them. So if you have a question right now, feel free to send us an email. You could also send me one if you at home at Raphael on TV. I have my phone handy, so I will ask you a question on your behalf. Director Riggs, true or false, can you, if you hire more police, if you hire this 500 more or 400 more officers, will this reduce the problem like that?
That would be false. But I will say that it can help. And by putting more officers on the streets, and the mayor has been working for the last 3 years and trying to find us funding, but putting more people on the street will give us greater intelligence, form those relationships and partnerships we need. But money is not the answer. More officers is not the total answer. It's part of the answer. We can put money into social programs. We can work, and we're doing that, working with our friends with the Community Foundation and also our Department of Public Safety Foundation. But nothing takes the place of a citizen of Indianapolis stepping up and helping a young man or young woman that's from a broken family get a good education, holding them accountable, and mentoring them. That will have more of an impact than arresting someone or hiring an officer to put on the street, because that's a lifelong impact. In some cases, it breaks generational issues that family's been dealing with.
Is that what you see from your office?
In what respect?
In the respect that, will more officers help you with caseloads? Will more officers help you prevent crime? Or is it an issue of having more people getting involved?
Well, first of all,
And when I say people, I mean mothers, fathers, cousins, grandmothers, TV people, all of us.
Absolutely. But in the first instance, would additional staffing help? Absolutely. I've certainly been on record that from our perspective, we have a front row seat to the fact that we believe the department's been significantly understaffed. But having said that, certainly we want the community involved. We cannot do it alone. I've been like a broken record in that regard, that we need the engagement of Channel 6, faith-based groups, neighborhood association, crime watch clubs, and through our office, and I know the department does the same. I mean, we do outreach efforts where we're encouraging and providing the mechanisms for folks to be involved. And I think from our individual offices' perspective, we need to do a better job of letting the public know what we have in place and how they can become engaged with us and with our police partners.
Mr. Mayor, before we let people get up to the mic, and so this is your cue, those of us in this room, and we have a great number of people, faith-based and civic leaders in this room, so we invite you now to go to the mic while I ask this question of the mayor. So when I finish asking him the question, we'll come out to the audience. Mr. Mayor, what do you see as the biggest challenge then? I mean, you have been on every television program, you have been to every neighborhood group, you attend many of these conversations. What is the biggest challenge? Is it the fact that at home something is broken? And when I say home, parents. Is it the fact that schools are not doing a good job? I mean, I know you don't want to be involved in a blame game, but at the end of the day, we have to identify that there is a problem. So what is at the root of the problem, and what must be fixed now?
We are in a multi-generational cycle where literally parents don't know that they're supposed to be parents. I hear it all the time that we need to hold the parents accountable, we need to teach them. The parents of today have never seen what parenting is, so it's tough to hold them accountable, to be frank with you. So there's, I think, as you pass that along generations, I think that's a fundamental misunderstanding that I think the average citizen has. They literally don't understand that there's nobody at home. There's nobody at home. And so when you listen to these primarily young men, and when I was teaching, I had young women the same way, who their parents were, what their parents did, came nowhere close to even the word parenting. They are essentially on their own at an extremely young age, and I don't think not just the city, but clearly the nation, does not fundamentally understand that these kids are literally raising themselves at a very young age. And their influences on the street are destructive, to say the least. And unless we start seeing and understanding that and making sure that there's a caring adult in their life with a path to a good education, we're never going to get out of this.
As we wait for people to take the mic before I go into the audience, if they don't stand to the mic, Mr. Mayor, we just have our first Facebook question for you, Mr. Riggs, and that's the issue of curfew. Will we see a tighter curfew with the understanding that so often the courts get involved and say, you can't restrict people from doing this or that, but do we need a stronger curfew is the first Facebook question right now.
I believe we do. Chief Height's been very supportive of it. Quite frankly, he has had, as conversation, been very honest, taken a few hits on that as well. And I'll tell you why. We regulate young people using alcohol. We regulate young people using tobacco. It makes sense to me that we would not want young people out in the middle of the night or early morning hours where they could potentially be a victim or get involved in something they shouldn't be. They're young people. We have instances after instances where we have individuals that are in their early teens that are seen walking late at night with young children as young as 2 years of age, carrying them and walking around. That is not a good atmosphere to live in. That's something that we have to hold people accountable, and we're supporting it because we want to make sure that our young people are safe.
Mr. Prosecutor, you're the lawyer on the table. How does one construct then some sort of ordinance? Because so often the courts just strike these things down and say, young people have liberties. You can't do this, you can't do that, and then you get a watered down kind of ordinance because the courts won't hold them to be constitutional. Is there a way to have a constitutional law that holds young people accountable and parents accountable not to be on the streets at 3 in the morning?
Well, I don't think there's an issue whether a curfew in and of itself would be legal or constitutional. It probably would be. But this is an area where perhaps I differ with the chief and with the director in that I think up to this point there's not been sufficient conversation about the subject of a curfew, and what research we're aware of would show that the majority of crimes committed by juvenile occurs at 3 p.m., not at 3 a.m. And so as a consequence, I think this is a subject that deserves significantly more conversation, and as it relates to constitutionality, I know in the past, and this predates probably all of us here, on occasion the police agencies have done curfew sweeps. That does raise significant constitutional issues. Whether the public likes it or not, that's what the courts have determined. And so I think the whole issue of curfew is something that deserves pretty significant conversation before we go down that road.
So do we punish the parents or the kids? Or do we punish them both?
Well, and that becomes a function of how it gets enforced, and I think that's pretty much an issue.
Can that be enforced? I mean, again, so often.
Well, if there's a curfew, let's be honest. As a practical matter, no one's prosecuted for a curfew. If someone's picked up for a curfew, they're transported somewhere, perhaps a juvenile or somewhere else, and the parents are called and told to come pick them up. And so, again, I think this is all part of the conversation needs to take place. Is it necessary? Number two, what's going to be the effect of it? Number three, how do we enforce it, and how do we go utilize it if it's to be a tool?
Mr. Riggs, Mr. Mayor, do you see a curfew rule that can be enforced? Can we hold the parents accountable? Do we want to hold parents accountable? Can we hold them accountable?
Sometimes there's nobody to hold accountable. I guess that's what goes to my previous statement. Where are they? I mean, where do these kids live? Got to understand that.
So then how does one then construct something that the public may say, yeah, a curfew is a great idea?
Well, we have an ordinance now. This is tightening the ordinance somewhat. It's something that the chief believes in, and looking at his stats and statistical information, a lot of the homicides, a lot of the trouble that our officers are having with young people is during those times past our current curfew, whether it's downtown, Broad Ripple, anywhere in the city. He thinks it's a tool that his officers could utilize, thinks it's important for safety, and we're going to support that. There will be a lot of dialogue and a lot of conversation before that ever gets through council.
Mr. Mayor, are we ready for the summer? It seems that the summer months, people seem to act out more than usual.
Sometimes that's true, sometimes
And
that's not
always,
true.
Right,
but-
right. I don't want to
but-
make a broad statement, but it just seems that in the summer, people have,
so-
they could be outside more often.
Sometimes the stats can be a little deceiving, but sometimes that is true, and I don't want to go into the litany of things that the police are doing. I'll leave that to the chief, who I assume will be following
Sure.
this. So, but I would suggest that there's a lot of activity heading into the summer. There certainly was last summer also.
We have our first question at the mic, ma'am. If you could just introduce yourself and just ask the question.
Hi, I'm Sue Spicer. I'm president of Willard Park of Holy Cross Westminster Civic Alliance. And what I'm curious from the panel, is there anything that our state legislature could do to help our situation, both as cities and the rural problems that all the communities are facing? Is there something you have a wish list for that the state legislature would give us besides mass transit?
Don't stray on me, Ms. Spicer. Don't stray on me. You heard the question, gentlemen.
Well, I've been very upfront about this. I know that, judges and prosecutors don't really like me for saying this sort of thing, but I do think there should be mandatory minimums for gun charges. I mean, I just do. And we see repeatedly that people who commit the ultimate act have probably had something in their past before that maybe we should have taken more notice of. And so there may be disagreement with that, but I was pretty firm over at the State House that I wanted more punishment for those who use the gun.
Mr. Curry, did you want to address that issue? Do you want to see tougher sentences on?
Well,
guns?
and I think this is a conversation that would take more than 20 minutes because I guess if I try to tell it in shorthand fashion, on the one hand, our
I'll give you the
legislature.
time. I'll give you the time.
On the one hand, our legislature for a number of years have been looking at a complete revision of the criminal code, our entire criminal code. And that was passed the last session, not this most immediate session, the session before that. There were some small tweaks in this session. It's all going to go into effect on July 1st. But what the public probably doesn't understand is, while on the one hand, and what the mayor's referring to is an enhancement that would be added onto a sentence for a separate crime. In other words, you'd have to commit a separate crime before the enhancement would be added. But in the context of the revision of the entire criminal code, the legislature's actually gone the opposite direction in terms of a number of the sentences that can be imposed for various crimes. And in fact, it's apparent that the entire conversation as it relates to the criminal code revision is to reduce the population of the Department of Correction. Now, that may be appropriate, but it's sort of inconsistent with on the one hand, wanting to increase penalties for a single type of situation, while at the same time, in a broad sense, rolling back sentences. I'll give you an example. We currently have a crime called serious violent felon. That is an individual who has committed certain prior felonies and is found with not committing an additional crime, but having a weapon in their possession. It's called serious violent felon. It currently is a B felony, which carries a 6 to 20 year sentence under the laws that exist now. In 2013, our office filed 204 SVF cases. In the first 3 months of this year, we filed 48. Under Indiana law, as it exists now, that is a non-suspendable offense. In other words, the minimum part of the sentence you would have to serve executed because you've now struck out twice. You have a serious, very serious prior felony, and you continue to carry a weapon. Under the code as revised by our legislature, it is now called a level 4 felony, which is a 2 to 12 year term and is entirely suspendable by the court. So I believe you just sort of provoked me into a little bit of a rant, but on the one hand, the legislature wants to talk one way, but on the other, holistically, they've done something entirely different.
So the legislature goes back to work in 2015. When it does resume, what will you, as stakeholders in this community, be asking the legislature to either change, do, or get right?
Well, from our perspective, we will be carrying the same message we've carried in the last 2 sessions, which is many of the things that have been done here are really going to hamper our efforts to attack violent crime. We communicated that message 2 sessions ago, this most recent session, and not only our office, but the entire Indiana Prosecuting Attorneys Council, every prosecutor in the state. And so we'll continue to send that message.
They'll be
Mr.
hearing from
Mayor?
us. They will be hearing from us
And what will they
again.
hear from you, Mr. Mayor?
Same thing that they heard this time. If you use the gun, I want you to go away for much longer than you are now.
And can you really stand, we just had the NRA here, can you really say that?
I have. I said it
I don't-
publicly
no,
many, many times.
Listen, I know you have, but what I'm asking you is, can you stand up to the gun lobby? Will they say, come on now, Mr. Mayor, don't do that. We're gonna put millions of dollars and knock you down.
That's not relevant. I don't think that's relevant at all.
So lobbies have no relevance
No,
when it
I'm
comes
saying
to
that
politics.
particular, I mean, there are people at the State House that probably do, align with that particular lobbying group who were willing to stand up with me.
Yeah, that's, I guess, was gonna be my point, is I don't think we have any trouble standing up to the gun lobby.
I don't think
It's
so
the
at all.
legislature that has problems
Well,
standing
that's
up
what
to
I
the
was
gun
asking, sir. I
lobby.
was just asking, will the legislature be able to stand up to?
I would tell
I'm
you
sorry, ma'am,
that
did I ask
I
you
know
a
at
question?
least one of the legislative members who is, aligned with that particular lobby, who was wanting to stand up with me and say the
Okay.
same things I was saying.
Do
So
you
I
want to
would
say his
su-
name?
No.
Okay.
Hey, Raphael, if I can just add
Please.
too, is one of the reasons it's so important to us and how the State House can help, or at least look at this, and we need to look at this locally. In 2012, our homicide victims and our homicide suspects, they very closely mirror each other when you look at their histories and their past criminal record. 70% on average of both victims and homicide suspects had some type of crime against persons in their past. 40-something percent, usually fluctuates between 40 and 45%, use a weapon in those offense. In 2013, that number jumped to 75%. So far this year, that number is over 80%. Chief Hyde and the police department is doing a very good job of arresting individuals. The problem is they're arresting the same individuals that have been involved in violent crime in the past, and now they're involved in a homicide. And we're troubled by that, and we think we can do a better job.
And we also want to give our men and women in blue
We do a lot of work.
an A+ for the good work they do every day. I want to thank our first set of panelists, the Mayor of Indianapolis, Mr. Greg Ballard, Public Safety Director Troy Riggs, who will join us a little bit later, and of course, the Marion County Prosecutor for joining us this evening. Please give them a round of applause. Ms. Spicer, you can come back with another question, because you know I'm liking your questions. Of course, for those of you at home, remember that we are taking your questions online on the RTV6 app and on our Facebook page, as well as our website, theindychannel.com. As we transition here at the table, I'm going to talk to the mayor here to continue talking. Mr. Mayor, you want to join me while we change tables? Our next speakers, of course, will be Ms. Regina Marsh, who is an amazing community activist. Of course, she'll be joining us also. Police Chief Rick Height and the Reverend James Jackson. As they get comfortable at the dais, I will be speaking to the mayor, so join me online. Mr. Mayor, of course, you have never been shy to go to the State House and make demands. So I want to continue that discussion. When you go back to the legislature in January, and I'm sure you'll talk to them before January, what kinds of things will you be asking for to help you and other urban centers with this issue of crime?
It's certainly not just Indianapolis, but if people use the gun, we need to look at stronger census, because you just saw the stats, you just heard the stats from the public safety director, over and over and over again. We are rearresting the same people, and if we don't do the right thing, if we don't have the right punishment at the right time, get the right services, whatever it might be, if we don't do the right things at that point in time, we're going to see a bigger tragedy down the road. History has proven that, and I'm going to continue to make that point.
Do you think the legislature at times forgets about the big cities? It seems, even with the personal business property tax, all of you had to come together, different issue, but you all had to come together in a bipartisan form and remind the legislature that millions of people live in big Indiana cities. Is the legislature, have they forgotten that Indianapolis is the capital city, and Kokomo and Gary and Fort Wayne?
Well, I hope they haven't forgotten that, because we throw off a lot of money to the rest of the state because of the economic engine of the city of Indianapolis. So I don't think they've forgotten that. But sometimes people have different views, and we have just to keep pounding the views. And I think I won't be the only one over there saying that this year. But I've already been talking to somebody who has helped us in the past and will continue to help us, and he's already put some things together for next year also.
Final question, sir. How do you rally parents to get involved? You just talked about, in many cases, many parents are not there. So then how do you rally all the others to say, we want to join in this effort?
Well, we're hoping our task force gives us a path, because there are some good programs out there. There are some programs maybe not strong at all, maybe not effective at all. So it may be parents, it may not be parents that we want. I would suggest to you that the key to this is having a caring adult in every kid's life and the path to a good education. If we can marry those two together for every single child in our city and across the nation, a lot of this would go away.
The Mayor of Indianapolis, Greg Ballard. Sir, thank you so much. We appreciate your time. We are getting ready now to continue our conversation on the IndyChannel.com and the RTV6 app as we begin our second segment of our program. Now our panelists joining us here at the table. As you know him very well, the police chief of the city of Indianapolis, Rick Haidt, with the Forest Manor Multi-Service Center, the executive director, Regina Marsh, and the Reverend James Jackson. Chief, you just heard from your bosses the need for more people to get involved. You heard talk of the curfew. It is your men and women that every day must enforce the law. You don't get to pick the laws, you enforce the laws.
Very true.
So what do you need?
Well, thank you, Raphael, for bringing this to the forefront. I think it's important that we do what we need right now is exactly what we have right now: exposure, transparency, and understanding that the value of our community is given and decided by the community. Our job basically comes out of the moreways and folkways of that value. And our enforcement efforts has to be clear. And what we have to have is a real understanding as to what the expectations are of the community, because, as the director indicated, more and more of what we're seeing is becoming social. When I arrived here, I would say it was 50%, and back in 2010. I think we're moving upwards of 75 to 85% of what we're seeing has nothing to do with traditional law enforcement, has to do more with social ills. So the challenge is for us is to be able to identify the resources along with law enforcement, the enforcement end of it, but resources to talk about a long-term sustainability plan and not arrest our way out of this problem.
Regina, you are in the neighborhood. As I often say, you are an oasis on the city's east side. You work with families, hundreds of families. So what is it that you need? Because you see this every day. What's the real deal?
Well, it's everything. You know, we can say it's money and throw money at it. We can say we need to better education, but we do need more caring people in the community. We do have a lot of single parent women. We have single parent fathers in our community that are doing the best they can with the resources they have, but they need more. But we as a community have to come around those folks and provide other resources, programming, mental health, social programs, civic programs that our families can become involved in. Parenting classes are great, but if a mother's working 8 to 5 or 8 to 6 and still trying to make it home to care for her child, then it's going to be hard for her to then attend a class that evening. And so we've got to have programming that is accessible to our families, that can work in between what they're still trying to do. Because we can't say that our whole community is gone. We have a strong community, but we do have folks that need additional resources.
Yeah, we have a great community, by
Yes,
the way.
we do.
We live in a great state with
Yes.
great people. When you talk about programming, can you be more specific? Is this after-school programs? Is this mentoring? What is it that you need so that people who are watching right now can say, I could do that?
Mentors. We need folks that can give us time to give to our children, to be that reinforcement for those families, to be a reinforcement for the single parents or the ones that don't have two-parent homes or don't have other resources. We need them to give time. We need in-kind services. We need mental health counseling in our community, and we need to be honest about mental health counseling in our community. We have children that are witnessing murders and are witnessing crimes, that live in communities that are constantly in turmoil, and we need to realize those babies need someone to talk to. They need someone to work out their problems. And in some ways, are they working out their problems through the violence and the crime that the chief and others have seen in our community? So when we talk about social issues, we need to be honest about mental health. We need to be honest about families. Some families are working very hard. There are people in the homes that are doing the best that they know to do. But we've got to provide them with additional services like mental health, like after school. We have a great program with the POW Club, but they're only in one location because we don't have the finances to move the officers into the communities, or we don't have enough officers to serve with the POW Club. After school program at Forest Manor, we have 90 kids, and I could use more staffing and more dollars. And many of the community centers, which we have one that covers the entire, we have enough centers in this city that cover the entire county. But they can't do it without the financial backing to continue what they do.
Reverend James Jackson, what's the church's role what is the role of the faith-based organizations? We've heard so much about opening up the churches in our neighborhoods, making them centers of hope, using those facilities after hours, beyond Sunday or the Wednesday night service. What's that piece of the puzzle look like?
I think churches help change the culture because we change the minds of people from a biblical perspective. And I think that the churches can do and have done a great job at that. A lot of our churches also have Christian daycares and schools where a lot of our young children spend a great deal of time, anywhere from 6 o'clock in the morning to 6 p.m. in the evening. And when you have children that long, there's a lot of good you can do in impacting those children's lives. So we need more support for our churches who are in.
Can I interrupt you? When you say more, can you be more specific? Do you need someone right now, because you're on 5 cameras, what do you need right now? I mean, do they need to call you? Do they need to send you a check? I mean, what is it you need right now? Instead of just saying more, what is the more?
Well, we do need more, as Regina Marsh said, mentors. We've had a youth employment program for the last 2 years. We've been hired and employed 800 youth last year and 300 youth the year before, and our goal is to employ 1,000 youth this year, and we're going to do that.
So you need employers, right?
We need employers, we need dollars, and people the philanthropic community that wants to help support that effort can send me an email at pastorjamesjackson@gmail.com.
Say it again.
pastorjamesjackson@gmail.com. And this is not all of that we're going to fix in our community. It's not going to happen over a year's time. It's a multi-year fix, and it's not thousands of dollars. It's not hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's multi-millions of dollars over a long period of time that's going to help us and give us the financial wherewithal to solve the problems.
When he talks about mentors, I want to be clear, I think we agree on this. They're not just the lawyers, the doctors, the teachers in the community. Those are folks that also have been through those issues in our community and have turned their life around. Those are as important. Many of our kids that we talk to, they want to see kids like themselves, people that have been through this criminal justice system or have dealt with other issues that can become the mentors. So it doesn't have to be this person from this economic situation. It doesn't have to be this person from this neighborhood. It has to be someone that really cares enough to come into these communities or come back to the communities they were once in and give back to these children in the communities. And parents. Parents need them also.
And caring can be worth billions of dollars, right?
You wouldn't believe it.
We are taking your questions live right now on the RTV6 app and on the IndyChannel.com. We thank you for joining our community conversation here at RTV6 online. And Chief, one question for you.
Sure.
This is from one of our viewers. CJM wants to know, I hear many in the community saying that violence is something that happens when you mingle with criminals. She says, this is not true. I think that some of these young offenders are very lost and are trying to live up to the morals that are set before them.
I couldn't agree with him more. I think violence is a learned behavior. I think it oftentimes, unfortunately, starts in the home. We have a challenge in our society in how we deal with conflict and mediation. But let's face it, Raphael, what you heard was from 2 excellent speakers about the whole issue of how we see ourselves as a community, and it's a health crisis. I'm looking at the health commissioner right in front of us. She can tell you. I'm looking at a physician, a great doctor who works at EMS, in charge of our EMS, who will tell you that we had to take police out of the equation long enough to be able to have a real conversation about what's happening in our families. We're prepared to pass the baton on, but we have to recognize that many of the issues we're faced with are dealing with long-term community, family issues and challenges, and that we're there for a few minutes as a law enforcement entity, and we're looking for someone. When we see people leaking or the affect is off, who do we turn that baton to? Who do we give that baton to? Who do we pass that individual on so they don't fall through the cracks?
As this conversation continues, we want to remind everyone at home that, of course, you could join the conversation on the RTV6 app and the IndyChannel.com, but we also, in the Studio B here at RTV6, we have a great group of people, community leaders from all facets of life, and our questions now here at the mic. Yes, sir, introduce yourself and ask your
Yes,
question.
I'm Tim Nation with Peace Learning Center, and I know there's been a number of crime prevention conversations that have been going on in the community, and I was wondering if you could help us learn what you've heard from the young people in our community about what's causing crime and what their suggestions are.
the first thing we learned from the first community conversation and onward is, number one, they haven't been heard. They have ideas, they have thoughts, they need to be heard. When we call a meeting, we don't, oftentimes, the very equation that we talk about is missing in the equation. The young people, that 1% of the population that we often talk about, need to be heard. Second thing they ask for are places, open spaces and safe places. We talk about this whole issue of where do we want young people to go and what do you want to do when they get there. The third thing is access to employment and education. They want to be able to break the cycle. That means that sometimes it means breaking the mold. If there wasn't a designated model in the community, they want to be able to create one or find one. Through what Regina said in terms of mentorship, they want people to help them transition from that environment they're in now into a new environment. But they need help, and at the same time, they want to be able to share their ideas with us. We are caring adults, so we hear them.
So, Reverend, this is really a key moment to say that a job is very key to a young person this summer, right? I mean, they need to call you. We need to get employers in some way involved in getting people, not only the youth, but also adults. That job is very important to them.
Absolutely. In America, 62% of youth 16 to 24 years of age are not employed. Here in Indianapolis, those numbers are high as well. Across the state of Indiana, the Indiana Black Expo released a report a couple of years ago, and unemployment is high across the state. And when people are not working, imagine what it would be like in Indianapolis if there were no jobs for the majority of people who live in this city. You couldn't live in this city. That is one of the most basic needs of a human being, a job. And so a lot of these youth who are looking for work, 16 to 24 years old, they're competing with adults. It used to be you could go to McDonald's and you could get a job. You could cut grass, you could deliver papers. And now you have companies who are cutting grass and companies who are delivering papers. And so the young people have been pushed out of those jobs. And so we have to be creative. We have to create jobs for them. And I think if you combine jobs and mentoring, then you have something that can help solve the problem.
And what's that Gmail account again?
PastorJamesJackson@gmail.com.
Every time you answer a question, just start off with that. We have another person at the mic. Ma'am, introduce yourself, please, and ask the question.
Hi, I'm Nancy Michael. I'm a crime watch captain for Woodruff Place. I have two questions. One, my backyard overlooks Arsenal Tech, and all of us in Woodruff Place know that youth after school is a problem, but so is youth during school. What's being done about truancy?
Chief?
Well, that's something that it's back to, well, much like truancy and curfew go hand in glove. We know that truancy leads to, it's a gateway into delinquent, I won't say criminal, delinquent behavior. But it goes back to what we discussed about the other night is political will and understanding community wants. We want to be able to help young people transition back to school. The question is, once they're there, are the services there? As one person put it the other day, they walk in the front door and they walk out the back door, and that's the question, whether it be home or at school. Second thing is that really the police's responsibility solely? If I choose not to go to school, if I'm not going to school, who's going to triage me? Who's going to assess me and figure out what's going on with me cognitively? Is it an IEP issue? Or what's happening in the home that I'm not being encouraged to do that? Lastly, is it a safe environment? Do I feel threatened while I'm at school? What are the barriers? What are the threats, real or perceived, that we need to know about as a community to make sure that young person feels comfortable going to school?
Before you ask your second question, are you working with IPS's superintendent, Dr. Farabee, on these issues?
I think he's brought about a change in direction in thinking. We're working with, not only with the superintendent, but we're also looking at working with charter schools, which is a discussion we can have about the whole notion of what we're doing in truancy, but also working with the school police.
Let me add to that.
Please.
Indianapolis have signed on with the Cities United, which is an extension of the National League of Cities. 800 cities across America have instituted curfews, and in some cities, 21% of those 800 cities across America have instituted daytime current curfews, and they are seeing extraordinary results. 97% of those cities who instituted those curfews have seen drops in crime 1 year after they instituted them. I have a curfew at my house. Everybody in at 10. And it's been working.
I bet it
including
has.
you.
Regina?
Just to piggyback a little bit on the curfew part, I totally agree with you as a parent of a 16-year-old girl who would not be out without me after 8 o'clock,
And I know
much
that.
less
Yes, ma'am.
11 o'clock. But what we've got to think about, if we talk about changing the curfew, what does that mean for the children whose parents are not going to pick them up that night, who are not going to have transportation, who are not just going to not pick them up? What type of wraparound services are we going to have available for those children when they're there? Because a lot of times what happens is we have these families whose kids don't know they're out, or they know they're out and they don't care. And then these kids are out and now they're not necessarily in the juvenile justice system, but with people that have not been picked up as well. And what does that perpetuate? We also need to look at what are the financial ramifications of picking up more children once the curfew, if this curfew changes. So we need to think about the social needs that go with our children as well as just the curfew.
And to that point, the League of Cities who have joined together have dealt with that. And there are services, care centers, where these children can be taken to where there are mentors there. And that's part of the reason why it's working. So on the other hand, if you have children out at 1 o'clock in the morning, 15, 16, and 17 years old, they could become victims, and they could be victimizers. So I don't think, in my opinion, in my research and the data that I have found in cities that's working across America have proven, we're not saying we're hoping it's going to work. There are 800 cities across America who are doing it, and it's working. Now, I will say this to Regina's point, and she's right, we can't do exactly what other cities are doing, but what they have said in my research is that you customize it to your particular city. So if we go forward with it, it has to be customized to how it will work for Indianapolis.
And the needs of Indianapolis.
And this conversation and debate will continue. Ms. Michael, do not leave that microphone. We want to thank these panelists for joining us. I want to thank the police chief for the city of Indianapolis, Mr. Rick Height. Regina Marsh, thank you so much. And of course, your website, sir, Reverend
Pastor
James Jackson.
JamesJackson@gmail.com.
Don't forget that website.
Again, that's PastorJamesJackson@gmail.com.
And why don't you join me down here, Mr. Reverend Jackson, so we can talk a bit more. Thank the panelists, please. If you're at home, thank you. If you're at home, I want to remind you that we are continuing this conversation on our website, theindychannel.com, on our app, the RTV6 app, and of course, we have great leaders in the room who will be participating in the conversation. We want to welcome to the dais the next set of speakers. That'll be, of course, with the Marion County Health Department, Dr. Virginia Kane. We will welcome back Chief Height and Public Safety Director Troy Riggs. So as they set up, I'm going to talk to my great friend that has the best website in town. Reverend Jackson, I want to get back to the issue of jobs, because we know that the unemployment rate, if we can say it that way, is extremely high for the youth. So how do you go about connecting that young man and woman to that job?
Well, those who will go to the website, Pastor James Jackson, or send me the email, pastorjamesjackson@gmail.com. We're working with the Cafe Community Center. We're also working with the City of Indianapolis, and they will be able to register for these jobs as we've done for the past 2 years. So it's pretty simple. All the parents have to do is let us know that they want their child to work, and we get them going.
Ms. Michael, I know that I put you on hold. Did you have a question for the Reverend or for someone else?
Someone else.
Okay, you stand by, Ms. Michael, because I appreciate your
That's
time.
fine.
Reverend, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I hope everyone goes to your
PastorJamesJackson@gmail.com.
Listen, there's nothing wrong with good marketing.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
your time.
Appreciate it.
As we continue this community conversation, we want to welcome all of you again, as RTV6 is a proud host of this discussion. This next panel is about empowering you at home. So we talked about this is not just an Indianapolis issue, this is a central Indiana issue. We are all connected in some way. So we welcome this group of panelists to discuss the issue of empowerment. Not everyone is Oprah Winfrey, so the question is, if I don't have $1 million, what can I do in my corner of the world? What can I do to make my neighborhood safer right now at no cost at all? So let's welcome our panelists again, joining us now again, the Chief of Police, Rick Height, Public Safety Director Troy Riggs, and with the Marion County Health Department, the leader of that department, Virginia Kane. Dr. Kane, I want to start with you though.
Okay.
Have we reached the point that this issue of violence, and again, crime stats have gone down, overall crime, but homicides have gone up. Is this now a public health crisis when we see the number of men and women that are just killing each other?
Oh, definitely. It's a major, anything that touches the pulse of a community in terms of safety, And if we look at our numbers compared to what we have in the last couple of years, we're sort of going back in the wrong direction based on all the achievements we've had recently in the past. So it's a major concern. But anytime you touch the pulse of a community and impact its health, and you can't get any data impacting health than death, it's a serious public health.
So then from your
Crisis.
office, what needs to happen? Because you work with a lot of great partners, right?
Yes.
So what do they need to do to help you deal with those numbers?
Well,
and really, it's not even about numbers. It's about
Right,
lives,
right.
right? We can't replace these people.
So, almost every community is facing this type of epidemic. And we have all these different organizations, and each of us are working very hard, and we're hoping for a certain outcome. But it's got to take a coordinated, sustained effort in making a difference. And I don't care all the money in the world, all the resources in the world, if we don't have everyone down at the grassroots level playing their role, making a difference, this problem will repeatedly recycle itself after a couple of years.
Director Riggs, I guess what I'm hearing.
So can I just want to add
Yes,
one little
go ahead.
point? So for example, education is so critical, okay? So we have to look and see, we got to stop preventing these dropouts from these school systems. What are we doing to make sure that kids are staying in school, but they are doing well in school? They're just not in school, going to school every day, but they don't do nothing. They just sit there so that when they get out, they don't have a job. But we've got one of the best cities in the country, and we're going to have #1 basketball team too if they get it together tonight. But you can look from just the business sector how everyone has come together in making big differences in our city, so that if every business made a vow, I'm going to provide a job for every kid that's coming here. It's not enough for people to go into the fast food industry, but if every person, everyone who's in the business, has any business whatsoever, says, I'm going to make a job for a kid so that they can learn something in our business and we can mentor them, I think we could have huge dividends.
Our conversation continues on our website, theindychannel.com, and the RTV6 app. Ms. Michael, I'm going to let you ask the questions so you can have a seat. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you. We've been talking about the individual level and children, and we've been talking about a societal level. My question is about the organizations in between, the civic organizations and neighborhood organizations. How can we, as civic organizations, better alert the police and officials of problem spots in neighborhoods? We have landlords, for instance, who actively allow crimes in particular houses, and often those landlords allow it for years and years. I have not been able to find a process by which we can bring that to the attention of the people who can do something about it. We have another one developing on North Windsor, in fact, a house that is becoming a problem spot. How can we combat those particular places?
Director Riggs. Thank you,
Outstanding
Ms. Michael.
question. And let me just say, one of the reasons I felt it was important to have a community conversation is not just for large community conversations, but to go to your neighborhood and sit down and share data with you, not just crime data, but quality of life data, and make sure that we're sharing that so you understand it. But you hit on something that's so vitally important, is that we need to work with those community groups. We need to work with those foundations that are out there doing the work, those social service agencies. We need to really assist them. And I will make this promise to you and anyone listening tonight. If you have a crime issue, you have a quality of life issue, if you just don't know where to turn, we have a website too, but we also have an email address. And it's very simple. For Department of Public Safety, it's dps@indy.gov. We put that together so people could reach out to us and we could start developing those comprehensive plans. Now, the mayor has invested $15 million into a new system that takes in crime data, and we'll be able to map that crime data. So by the end of this year, you will get crime data information in real time. The biggest lag will be 8 hours. Most crime data will be available from the time the report was taken within an hour or 2 hours. We're putting that into place now. But here's the second part of that. Once we get that finished, you will be able to also access quality of life issues in your neighborhood, and hopefully someday the social services that are there. We have an efficiency team looking at those social services and putting them all in one comprehensive program. That will roll out in 2015.
Give us that website again.
It is dps@nd.gov.
Marketing is not a bad thing.
It is not a bad thing, and I appreciate that,
Yes, ma'am.
Raphael.
Ma'am, you have a question. Good evening.
My name is Nicole McGee, and I have a question for Chief Height and anyone else in this room that really can answer this. Yesterday, I'm not with any specific community organization or anything. I'm here for the people, period, to gain knowledge, to take it back to different communities for different meetings. I went to a meeting last night out south with the police department there, and I found out that they have a witness protection move program to help people that has been victimized or witness a crime that would get them out of that neighborhood to another neighborhood in Indianapolis. I never heard of that. And I tried to find it on IndyGov today, and I didn't find it. Is there something else similar to this program that's in the hot zones, the red zip codes, like Miss Regina's zip code 46218, the one is on, the zip code is on 38 in Lafayette over there. Are there other, a protection program like that for other people that, say for instance, like the day before yesterday, another guy got killed on, at the Abington Apartments. Never met his mother or anything. I'm at her house all night crying with her. We share a similar issue because my son was killed last year too. He wasn't one of those 70% either, so I'm proud to say that. But a lot of people are scared to talk and worried about getting hurt, their family being hurt, if they was to come up and speak. If people know about this, because that's out south. I've never been out there until yesterday. So if we could get the word out where they could find this, you know, on IndyGov or anywhere that I could get this information to other communities. I live in Lawrence, but I want to get it out to the other people that need help.
What I think you're hearing, ma'am, is
Thank you, ma'am.
some information that we're getting. If you said we're becoming sponges, as the director said, small group meetings, discussions, we're finding that people are asking us, can we provide exactly that, the witness protection? Now, currently as it exists, we're looking at exploring ideas to come out of these meetings. That was one that came out of the meeting. Can we provide that kind of coverage? I'll say this to you that, and very carefully, that we have developed a criminal tracking unit that looks at not only assessing what is happening in the community, but the persons who actually commit the crimes, the level of risk factor, high, moderate, or low risk, but also the victims, those people who they're targeting and the witnesses. So I won't go further into our plan on the air, but I will tell you this, it's being looked at very carefully and something we're looking at pursuing in a very positive way.
And Raphael, if I may, is part of community conversation is we're not just sharing information. We want to hear from you and we want to learn from you too. If we're not providing something that we could, we want to know that. But I want to say this, as the Director of Public Safety in the city of Indianapolis, I'm sorry that your son lost his life in this city.
Thank you.
I appreciate your willingness to be part of the solution.
And I appreciate you all. And I have to say that Indianapolis Police Department did not fail me. I can say that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Chief Height and his guys, they were awesome. And we do have someone detained for allegedly killing my son. But I was speaking to all these mothers I never met before in my life, that they go to bed every night wondering if they're gonna ever get someone that took their baby away. So when I say I'm not with an organization, I'm with all the mothers. That's my organization. I run around the city every day, every week. And I have a 16-year-old daughter at home, my last daughter at home. There are programs here. She's in a Civil Air Patrol program, learning how to fly, don't have a driver's license. Free. She boxes with Indy Boxing Officer Pat runs that on East Washington, free. So there are programs, it's just that these parents don't know about it. I'm gonna go get her. I want the best for my babies. I have a baby that's in the Navy in Japan, 20 years old. My daughter is 16, she's a sophomore. Next year she'll be a senior. Did you hear me? She'll be a senior. She's done with school next year. So the education free. We live in Lawrence. She's a class president. These mothers has lost their hope. And like the mayor said, how to be a parent. There is a need of counseling. I went to Miss Regina's Forest Manor, never heard of it, never been over there, but I gained information. She said they're having jobs for the kids, 16 to 23?
12 to 17.
12 to 17. They need those jobs, these kids, but that's just 46218. What about the other zip codes that's in the red zones that I learned from the other meeting at Charles Tinley?
So, come join me, please. So as a mom who can speak to the issue, I mean, you've been there. What do you tell them? How do you speak to the parents who should be packed into these community conversations and should be demanding action from people who want to help them? Speak to them and tell them what they can do right now, because there'll be a number of other community conversations throughout the city. So that these folks behind me that really want to do something, so it's not like they're hiding, they're here. What should those parents know?
I believe it should be more parents here than just me. I see a lot of community people here. There should be more parents. It was 100-something deaths last year. I see the same people. I'm not seeing new people. The only new people I'm meeting is the people that's losing their kids now. People are losing their children, and they're not speaking out. They're not wondering. They're not asking the police daily. They're not asking for the community to help. Miss Sarah Anderson lost her nephew January 5th this year. Never met her until this. She reached out to me, and she said, I need your help. I'm not with an organization. She said, but you got a voice. We don't have a killer. I said, what I can do, never been to Hogville, don't know where it's at. We're gonna get a car wash to raise more money so that people can talk. And I think the reason people are scared to talk is because of the witness protection. They don't have the they don't feel they have the protection. But if we put out there, we have other organizations or programs that will help them so that they don't be afraid to tell. That little boy was 19 years old. No one knows. Teenagers talk all day, social media. They can't hold any secrets.
So, because of that fear, what needs to change? Because the fear is legitimate, right? I mean,
It's
if you
legitimate.
live in that neighborhood,
They do.
I could swoop in and Chief Hike can send in the best officers that he has. Director Riggs can send in the best people he has. But you have to live in that neighborhood. So, what do you want? There they are. What do you want?
To get that witness protection program for the other parents. And like little DeAndre, 13, got shot February 5th. Another mother I never met. DeAndre is his mother. I went to her fundraiser at All That Jazz Cafe last month to raise money. Why? So that people can talk and say who shot him. He's a quadriplegic, 13-year-old boy, 100-something people at a party. No one talks. So we had a car wash. They had a car wash. So Solid Motorcycle Riders had a car wash for them. Raised $600. Not a lot, but it's more than what he started. So I'm doing the same thing for Miss Sarah Anderson, tentatively the 17th of May. Hopefully someone will talk.
Do you have a website?
I don't have a website
Way to
yet.
get your
I work
website.
for the people,
Listen,
for the whole
but
community.
But I want to say on behalf of all the folks in this room that you have a powerful voice.
Thank you.
And we want to thank you for sharing that.
I have a phone number.
Let's not do phone numbers,
Oh,
because then I'll have to investigate them for being creepy.
I can get an email.
You have email? Do it.
n.mcgee, M-A-G-E-E, @yahoo.com.
Thank you so much for sharing. We
Thank you.
appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you. Before we wrap up, I wanted to at least give some help to those folks that are watching us outside of the capital city, who again are watching us either on our website or on the app, RTV6 app? What can I do? I mean, this seems so overwhelming. This is just so, it's bigger than myself as an individual. If I am now on a street corner on Avenue B or on Washington Street, what do I do? What can I do right now to make my neighborhood safer and better for the people that live around?
Well, we've been asking people to roll up their sleeves, volunteer at some of these social service programs. A lot of the providers here tonight give money to those things as well. Not be complacent about crime, not to be apathetic about homicides, not to be apathetic about the quality of life of our city. And let me say this, Raphael, with our email address, dps@indy.gov, that's not just for Marion County residents. We are the state capital. We have a responsibility to this region and our state. We take that seriously. And if anyone needs help, I am sure the providers here is not going to turn people away because they're not Marion County. We're in this together. We need help. And I have a firm conviction and a belief that there is nothing this city can't accomplish. It's accomplished great things, far surpassing other cities, but nothing's more important than our young people.
Dr.
And
Kane?
we need to rally.
I think we have to know our neighbors, and I think we have to do a better job of trying to support our neighbors. I've been robbed twice. And I,
Recently, ma'am, or just over time?
let's just say maybe about a year and a half or 2 years ago. So I've been robbed twice. I think you have to get involved. The Neighborhood Crime Watch, I think they're good. There are other people that you can help, especially our seniors out there who may be living alone. There may be simple tips that you need to know in terms of how to safeguard yourself that I should have known about, and I'm better educated now. But I strongly feel it's the social determinants that are impacting us, and you got to start young. So when you're having young kids, like in daycare or before first grade, and they don't know how to interact with each other. And when you have someone saying, well, I just shot this guy in the leg, what is he complaining about? And think it's nothing to kill somebody, and there's no remorse in regard to this. And so whether it's watching these computer games and they see them shot all the time and then it's no big deal because they come back, we have to teach them really young, because by the time they become an adult, 17, 20, 24, that is hard to change behavior. So we really have to focus, I think, on those parenting, but we have to provide resources because there's so many single mothers out there, and they have to have one or two jobs. They're not just one job, but two jobs. So what are we doing to help our youth to graduate, but also socially have jobs in those fun things that are sponsored with supervision, in order to provide some support?
Before we go to the question, Chief Hyde, on this issue.
I think I have to piggyback what Dr. King and the director said. We have to care. We have to have a caring community that's invested in making sure all our neighbors are safe. And the most vulnerable in our community are our children and the elderly. So we have to make sure we do our neighbor check-ins. Checking with our neighbors means to make sure the community recognizes when our children are in crisis or communities in crisis. We heard someone talk about a single mom. Well, there was a time in our community where we would embrace that family. And we would oftentimes have a good discussion, as a family discussion around the community, how we can make them safer. But we have to go back to those old ways. It's back to the future, Raphael, and making sure we understand when the police arrive on the scene that we're there to help, but we have community support as well.
Sir, you have the final question of the evening, sir.
My name is John Smith. I'm with the Hawthorne Community Center, as well as Life Changers LLC. During one of our conversations, one of the young people stated something that was very powerful. She said, you suspend us from school, you take us to juvenile, but then you send us back into the same abusive situations that caused us to be in that condition in the first place. My question is, we have a lot of angry young people out here who do not have answers, solutions, or the support that they need. How can we come together, number one, and provide a place for them to come to receive the necessary counseling, the necessary support, and actually get them to come in, because it's going to take something. something special to get these young people to come in and even speak to us. Another young lady at the same meeting said, "You're not listening. We're talking," or the reason that we don't talk, and Chief Height was there, was because you're not listening. So I think the parenting piece, but the most important piece is that we listen to them, that we take them seriously, and understand that young people get angry. And when they get angry and they don't know how to work that anger out, they don't have the devices within themselves to work that anger out, they should be able to count on us to provide some type of counseling, some type of mediation, something that's going to help them. What can we do?
And before they answer that question, give us your website, because you do great work at your center. So what is that?
I'm at the HawthorneCommunityCenter.org.
Thank you so much.
So let me just say, we have a wonderful adolescent community health center program. We've got a number of fairly qualified community health centers, over 18 of them. But we have one specifically just designed for teenagers. And we have social workers that have been trained for mental health counseling, and they can come and get it free. And we have evening classes. We're about to try to start our weekend classes. Best kept secret, we love you.
Dr. Kane, the issue that we have, though, is getting them to recognize the problem that is within them.
Right.
If they never recognize it, they'll never come.
So how do we get them there? Answer that question. Thank you, sir. How do we get them? I mean, that has to be a difficult thing. I mean, unless someone...
I would think you really have to touch the youth who are troubled, and we have to use them to help them get them there. We have to listen to them, and we have to sort of kind of follow their direction in terms of reaching other youth.
Chief Hyde?
I'm going to piggyback exactly what Dr. Kane said. Peer-to-peer mentoring, peer-to-peer education, understanding that we have to meet them where they are and provide them with an opportunity to not say right or wrong, because they reject that. The question is that working for you?
But we need more peer-to-peer outreach workers out there. You know, not that A student, not that honor student. I want that average student, you know, everybody knows, happy-go-lucky, but he doesn't mind going out there and say, hey, you know, I'm here to help you. I may make a little bit money on the side trying to do this, but I really want to help you. And those programs will work really well in Oakland, California. Just been fantastic. We need to start duplicating some of that.
Dr. Riggs, you got the last word.
But once again, the way we overcome this situation is how we got in this situation. One school deciding they're going to do something a little bit different. One neighborhood deciding that. One community group deciding they're going to work with another community group. That's how things grow organically. That's how we can grow ourselves out of this. I really, truly believe that success breeds success, and we're in a unique position. We have all these partners here and all of these faith-based organizations and business communities starting to come and gather around here and have this conversation, and I thank you for hosting this tonight.
On behalf of all of us here at RTV6, we want to thank you all for being a part of this community conversation. We thank you for being here in Studio B as we've been broadcasting on the RTV6 app as well as the IndyChannel.com around our table here at RTV6. We want to be part of the solution as well. So over the next couple of weeks, months, years, we'll be covering this issue, bringing the stories of people actually doing the good work to make a difference. We'll also be holding all these great people in this room accountable. So we look forward to telling their stories, holding them accountable, and making sure that you're kept informed on all of our platforms here at RTV6, our app, and the IndyChannel.com. Can you please give all yourselves a round of applause? And we want to thank you at home for watching. We received many of your questions. Once we're done here, some of us will get back on the computer and we'll start answering those questions. So again, thank you for watching on the RTV6 app and the IndyChannel.com. Have a good evening. Thank you.